My experience of anger was not that it was an emotion that arose and then I don't know, said something you didn't mean, or, punched somebody and felt better, or punched a wall and felt better, right? Like
Yeah.
my experience of anger was that it was ongoing and relentless.
Hello, and welcome to How to Be a Terrible Daughter, the podcast where we hate your parents for you. This is a podcast for anybody who's ever been called terrible or horrible or a disappointment or any other negative thing by your family. Here on this podcast, we make terrible jokes about our childhoods, and we talk about how we survived them. And then we share the tools that we've learned along the way. So, yeah. So, who are
Yeah.
we? I'm Elizabeth. I am a multimedia artist and a psychotherapist.
I'm Megan Caper. I am an energy healer and an occupational therapist. And we're
And we're
cousins.
cousins.
I missed the cue. We could try that again.
No, did we? It was more together than it's been in the
We
past.
we realized that we've never been able to say that line together. So we made up a cue and then I just, of course, completely ignored it. We'll
I
figure it
think
out at
it's,
some point or not.
I, you know what? It's authenticity, right? Not
Is
perfection.
yeah.
Which, what do they say? They say how you do anything is how you do everything,
Yeah,
right?
that's true. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So here we are.
And perfect is the enemy of good, right? So,
Yeah. I am learning that more and more deeply every day.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So today we're going to talk about anger, which I think is interesting actually, because I was thinking about the fact that our last episode, I think it was our last episode, was on compassion.
So, yeah.
For me, like anger and compassion are like two sides of the same coin sometimes. So I think we didn't necessarily do it on purpose, but I think this is sort of a natural part two to the compassion one.
Yeah, I think that that's healthy. I think about anger and compassion as like terrains, and that you don't have to avoid one terrain to get to another, and you don't have to rush through any particular terrain. I think that's why I'm a little bit more comfortable than other people not forgiving, because every terrain is valuable, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. I think for me, I realize that a lot of times what I'll do is because I'm so intuitive and I can see so clearly the trauma behind people's actions and behavior that
Yep.
I will default to compassion instead of being angry when really I should be angry at the way they're treating me, right?
Yeah,
And I mean,
I
I
get
think your point is valid. You can have both. But I think that sort of, I'm learning how to have both, right?
yeah.
Or
Yep.
just say, fuck the compassion. Doesn't matter what happened to them. They're still not allowed to treat me that way, and I don't have to interact with them.
Yes. Well, and I think that some of that links up to the being a person and not an object. Like if you feel anger, you're angry. That's your identity, right? Like objects are like, oh, I'm a toaster or whatever. But as a person, you can have all of those things, and you can experience all of those things, and you're not limited by any of those. So,
Yeah. We wanted to start by talking about why anger is a topic for a narcissistic parent podcast. And it's because anger is the one emotion that was probably the most perilous to have if you were growing
yeah,
up with a narcissist. It was the
yeah,
most dangerous for you to express, it was the most dangerous for you to feel, because anger was the thing that was going to trigger narcissistic rage in your parent most quickly, right?
yep, yeah,
So, learning how to it's like playing a game of Twister where you just like never stepped on the anger bubble, right? Like you
wow,
just, how can I
yeah,
contort myself and convince myself that I'm feeling anything but anger? I've got all the
yeah,
other emotions are like okay in certain, but
yeah,
anger is a never, right? Like you just never, never, never. or at least not in front of anyone, right? Like I certainly
Yeah.
had my fair share of anger that I, got out in my journal or took out on myself, right? But
Yeah.
just anger it directed at someone else was very much not safe
Yeah,
and not allowed.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think it's a form, what I see a lot as the way that it happens is you Darvo yourself, right? I see me do it and I see other people do it where it's like, I really hate it when that person does that. I'm really angry. Oh, but I've done that too. Or maybe I've done that in the past and maybe I should be looking at my own behavior and maybe, you know what I mean?
Mm,
It's like, and
yeah.
it's like we just talk ourselves out of it,
Yeah.
you know? But there is this aliveness that we really miss out on because anger is energy. It's life force.
Yeah. Anger to me is asserting a boundary or a need that is not being met, right? So if there's
Yeah.
something that you're either somebody's violated a boundary or you need something, you need some sort of connection or some sort of care or some sort of something, and somebody's not giving it to you. I think a natural response to that is to be angry, right?
Yeah. I wouldn't know.
Well, again, if you weren't raised in
I
the
don't know. They told
fucking
me that in school.
circus tent of being, raised by a narcissist.
Yes.
But both of those are absolutely unacceptable to narcissists, right? For you
Oh,
to have
sure.
any kind of boundary is completely unacceptable and selfish.
Yes.
And actually, for you to have any kind of need is also completely selfish, right?
Right.
So, the thing that will most quickly get the narcissist to project onto you and tell you that you're being self-centered is to have any kind of assertion or anger about your boundaries or your needs.
Absolutely. I remember one time my mother accusing me of being arrogant when
Mm-hmm.
all I was doing was being self-confident,
Mm-hmm.
and she just had this instinctual awareness of like, okay, got to stamp out that, got to
Mm-hmm.
stamp out that.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I think that there's also a connection there in terms of, anger is aliveness, and they do want to turn us into objects. There's this very deadly, this rage that, and I don't know if it has to do with, the rage at being a parent or whatever, because they're not really doing it for the right reasons, but that it's like they really don't want us to be alive,
Mm-mm.
because that gets in the way of their party, their
Right.
little tea party that they're doing with all the people in their lives.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
not like I'm
Well,
bitter.
right. Uh, I mean, if we're alive, that means we have some sort of ability to act on our agency, and that's incredibly dangerous, you know,
Absolutely.
to a narcissist, not not in
Yeah.
general. In general, everyone should act on their agency. But yeah,
Yes.
to a narcissist, that's incredibly dangerous. And so, it's most beneficial to a narcissist if their kids and everyone around them just feels like this sort of numb vessel, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what they create at every opportunity. I got arrogant a lot too. I got arrogant all the time.
I'm so proud of you. You know you're doing something right if a narcissist is mad at you.
Yeah. Oh gosh, we have to make a t-shirt out of that.
Yeah. I got such jollies when I found out from a family friend that, like, I don't know, like 20 years before I thought this person was talking shit about me, they were already talking shit about me when I was like a kid or a teenager. And I'm like, yes, I was a thorn in this woman's side for decades. Love it.
Good trouble. Good trouble. So yeah, you said, your mom called you arrogant, but like let's talk about what would happen if you expressed any kind of anger or asserted a need or held a boundary when you were growing up?
Well, I think I only did it once.
I was just as I was saying that question, I'm like, do I remember any times when I did that?
Yeah. Well, part of it is that you just learn really quick. You learn
Yeah.
really, really quick. I mean, it was, well, I think it starts with, them talking shit about other people. So, like, you
Hmm.
learn, like, it's like, oh, okay, I'm not supposed to do that. Or, oh, if I do something like that, she's going to talk about me or whatever. I mean, my mom used to get angry when my dad would bring home the dry cleaning and they had tissue paper in the things. And it was like, that's what they do. That's what they do. And like she spent like weeks and I don't know how long, but like saying, you have to tell them that they can't have the tissue paper in there. Like, it's like, really? Like, you're going to make them separate out your clothes, do this special thing for that. You know what I mean? And it's
Yeah.
just like, so just the rage at absolutely everything. And this thing, like, this is not supposed to be this way. It's like, well,
Yeah.
yeah, like things get dirty,
Yeah.
like that's part of the universe. So to actually answer your question, she would just bear down until she broke me.
Mm.
I mean, I think
Hmm.
when I was a teenager, there were many, many times where I would go into an argument being like, you know what? I'm not going to cry. She can go fuck
Hmm.
herself. I am not going to
Hmm.
cry. And then she would just keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going until I cried,
Yeah.
until I broke down. And then she would get this look on her face of like triumph,
Yep.
like,
Yeah. I
and
know
it's
that
like,
look.
what the fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah.
And then, of course, I
Who
would feel
does that to
bad.
their kids, by the way? Let's just stop for a moment and be like, who, like this? Yes, yes, I know all of the like clinical, like narcissists are looking for power and control and the whole power and control cycle, but who gets joy from making their kids cry? That's just fucked up. That's just completely messed up.
Yeah.
Like, and to have that happen over and over and over and over again in your childhood, like that alone, like barring everything else that happened, is just so messed up, you know?
Which is one of the reasons why the nuclear family is not a healthy thing because there's no one to see it. And
Yeah.
so all this shit kept happening. I mean, I understand that sometimes people see it and the shit keeps happening anyway, but it's like, we've got these structures in place that really support this shit, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I know that one of the good things is that now we've got mandated reporters. When I was growing up, we didn't have mandated child abuse reporting. And not that that was a joy in my job, but I'm grateful that we are mandated reporters, or I'm a mandated reporter, because I couldn't stand by. I couldn't. I wasn't
Yeah.
allowed.
Yeah.
And that saved me a lot of sleepless nights,
Hmm.
you know?
I think, the problem even with mandated reporting is this type of abuse doesn't leave any physical marks, right?
That's
And
true.
so
You're
even
right.
if you know it's going
Right.
on and you never have the whole picture as an outsider, right? Unless I
Yeah.
mean, you were someone's therapist, but right? Like,
Yeah.
if you're someone's teacher or you're someone, right? You never quite have the whole picture of what's
Yeah.
going on because the narcissist is so good at hiding things that I wonder if this type of abuse is reported less often than other types of abuse that are a little more overt, just because people are like, well, maybe that mom was in a bad mood, or maybe, like I just feel
Yeah.
like it's easier because the narcissists are so good at presenting a good face. And I know like when I
Yeah.
would bring things up about my mom to other adults, she would always have some sort of story or an excuse that made
Mm-hmm.
sense, that
Mm-hmm.
made it seem like I was overreacting or I misunderstood the situation or
Yep.
right. She
Yep.
would make it look like I was the one who was misrepresenting the situation, not her. And then she would just
Mm-hmm.
lie through her teeth about what was going on, you
Yep.
know? She would
Yep.
make up
Yep.
some story. So, yeah, I was just thinking, like, so when I was angry with my mom, which wasn't very often, and honestly, probably didn't start up on a regular basis until I was a teenager. I was a pretty
Mm-hmm.
quiet, compliant child, young child.
Yeah.
But when I would hold a boundary or when I would get angry about something or when I would say, like, that's not fair, I would often get the silent treatment,
Yeah.
right? So I would get the silent treatment because how dare I say something so terrible to her? The terrible thing was that's not
That's
fair,
not fair.
right? Like,
Like there's a child in this country who doesn't say that 5 times a day.
right. But that's not fair to her was, I was attacking her. I was not
Yes.
appreciating things. I was right. So that's not fair would get me the silent treatment.
Ay,
Or, I
ay.
mean, I will say that. the times when she did get physically violent, which were pretty few and far between, but were often in a response as a response to either me getting angry or me holding a boundary about something,
Yeah.
or me trying to stop her from doing something, which I guess is a boundary.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was like if I were to assert any kind of need or any kind of boundary, it would be met with like a 10 to 50 fold times response, right? And so I think that was the
Absolutely.
thing that really dissuaded me from being angry or expressing things other than in a very couched, calculated, taking her feelings into
Yes.
account
Yes.
way. Do you know what I mean? So when I would
Yes.
bring something up, instead of saying that's not fair, I'd be like, well, maybe if you saw this from my point of view, it might be that what you experienced was like I'd
I
totally have to
know.
like narrate the experience for her,
I
right?
know. I know.
And so that would sometimes work, although sometimes she'd still get furious at me, like that's how
Yeah.
can you even think that? That's so wrong for these reasons. But, so I would take my anger and I would put it through this filter of like stony calm, like extra calm,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
eye of the hurricane calm, right? Like,
Yeah.
okay, here we are in the calm place, and I am about to tell you why, calling me an asshole in front of my teacher was not okay or whatever,
Jesus
right? Like,
Christ. I remember one time I was reading a book about the the unseelie she, which is the dark fairies, and it was like this princess was like having this conversation with the queen, and the queen was like this super sadistic, horrible person, and the princess was the protagonist. She was really like having to negotiate this, like, okay, how do I talk to this queen and like manage her? And I'm like, I know this feeling. I know exactly what she's doing. Like, she's having to manage this person who has all the power in the world and needs to be placated
mhm.
and will hurt people, like,
Yeah.
seriously
Yeah.
damage and destroy people. And it's like, okay, so my life most closely looks like some kind of, dark fantasy horror,
Oh my God, the number of times I've read a book or watched a movie or a TV show, and there's some character who's like a serial killer or just the villain of the story in whatever way, right? Maybe like,
Yes.
who knows? And they go and they at some point give the backstory of what made this villain that way. And the
Oh,
number of times I've read or watched something and I'm like, that doesn't seem that bad. And then I'm like,
totally.
oh, no, no, no. It's my sensor. My radar's off. That story is actually very bad. Your story brings up a good point, which is that so it's not safe to express anger or feel anger. You have to like calm it down. You have to like, present it in this very compassionate,
Mhm.
calculated way. But also on the other side, the experience of someone being angry at you is also not healthy at all if you're growing up with a narcissist, right? It's
Yeah.
scary, it's dangerous. There's never any repair afterwards,
Mm.
right? So you're in this bind where anger, it's not safe to either express anger and it's not safe to be on the receiving end of anger, right?
Yes,
So
anger is fundamentally dangerous and bad.
it's fundamentally dangerous and bad. So you spend your life walking around trying not to anger people, right? Like trying not to have any
Mhm.
kind of experience where anyone else will get angry.
Yes.
And that, you know, well, I mean, we could talk about like that ends up with people becoming people pleasers and perfectionists and,
Yeah.
avoiding conflict at any cost and putting up with a
Yeah.
lot of shit from people that they shouldn't put up with because,
Right.
it's just easier to contort yourself into a weird twister shape than it is to
Mhm.
say, like, hey, that's not cool. That made me mad or whatever.
Yes. If you were taught that any conflict was basically like you had to approach it like the bomb disposal unit, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And you had to go in like the hurt locker and like
Yep. Yeah.
figure out which wire and cut the wire
Yeah.
because that's I mean that's really how it felt,
Yeah.
then yeah, you do people please and you are perfect because there's only so much of that bomb disposal shit you can do,
It
you
takes up
know?
an enormous amount of energy, and if you cut the wrong wire, you're dead, right? Like
Yeah, yes.
I remember, I think I mentioned this before on an earlier episode, but I remember when I was like in my teens and 20s and I started talking to my friends who would talk about like getting in fist fights, like bar fights or whatever, right? You're
Ow.
stupid, you're drunk, you get in a bar fight with
Wow.
someone.
That
And
sounds like fun.
yeah. And I remember like being really, really confused, but also not asking because I didn't want to ask a dumb question, right? But they would
Hmm.
talk about how they got in like a playground fight with someone, like, in high school or junior high or whatever, right?
Hmm.
And I remember just being super confused about that, but also feeling like, oh, I know I shouldn't ask this question because what I didn't understand was that when someone got angry enough to get into like a fist fight with someone, that they wouldn't keep going until that other person was dead.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
when I
Yeah.
experienced the level of rage where my mom started to like get physically violent with me, like I knew my life was in danger, right? Like I knew
Yeah.
that if it went too far or if I didn't placate her or,
Yep.
whatever that, I could be I could be buried in the canyon somewhere the next day, right?
I want to point out that you are not overreacting. You're not overreacting. You are describing it accurately. And I think it's really hard for grown-ups to remember how
How
terrifying
scared you were. Yeah.
grown-ups can be, especially when they are in charge of your every breath and the roof over your head and every
Hmm.
piece of food and all of this stuff. Yeah, I just want to like back you up right there. You know what I
Thank you.
mean? Like, yeah.
I think that doing somatic work has helped with that because intellectually, my brain
Yeah.
will prevent me from remembering how bad it was.
Mm-hmm.
But if I actually concentrate on how I felt back
Yep.
then and compare it to what would scare me that much now as an adult, it's a
Right.
life-threatening thing would scare me that
Yes.
much, right?
Yeah.
So that's the only way I've actually been able to even access those memories or the
Yeah.
emotions that I was feeling at that time because, yeah, my brain completely intellectualized that and shut it down. But yeah, I mean, it's my point being that if angering someone could endanger your life, right? So, like, of course, I never got in like a playground fight because, like,
Yeah.
I thought that there's a decent chance that I would end up dead. So,
Yes.
and the fact that people would talk about these fights that you would just beat each other up and then it would be over. And I remember in
Oh,
my
yeah.
mind
No.
wanting to ask all these questions of like, well, who backed down? Did someone have to intervene? Like, I
Right.
didn't understand that a fight could just be like a couple punches and then you got your anger out and it's over. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like was not my experience of anger at all. My experience of anger was not that it was an emotion that arose and then I don't know, said something you didn't mean or,
Mm.
punched somebody and felt better or punched a wall and felt better, right? Like
Yeah.
my experience of anger was that it was ongoing and relentless, right? Like you said, your mom would
Yeah.
keep going until you cried. Like there was
Absolutely.
she wasn't just trying to get that anger out and like let it
No.
pass. Like you were her target, right?
Yeah.
And whether it was emotionally going after you and eviscerating you or physically going after you and eviscerating you, it was the same energy behind it, right? So that's why I think, people end up spending so much energy towards being people pleasers and contorting and changing themselves and blaming
Yeah.
themselves and, whatever is because other people experienced anger as like a momentary flash that maybe lasted a minute or two, right?
Hmm.
And so like a parent said something like, you're just so, I can't deal with you right now, as all parents do, right? At some point, right? All parents lose their shit at various points.
Yeah.
But the relentlessness of it, right? The like, I'm not doing this to get my frustration or anger out. I'm doing this to hurt you. And I'm not going to stop
Yes.
until I see you hurt
Yes.
is, I think, a very particular narcissistic trait.
And
Nobody experiences who isn't a relatively emotionally healthy family.
Yeah. Yeah. And my experience is that it's the anger's always there. Is it contained or not?
Mm,
Right. So it's like, like literally like one of those like water pumps, under the city, right? Where it's like you've got like a thing that closes it in, and then it's like you open it up and it's just like,
yeah.
and then it'll just keep going until it gets closed back up. There's no end ever. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed. So, yeah, I mean, if the anger nozzle is always waiting to be turned, like, yeah, you will do everything in your power to like tiptoe around that nozzle, not turn it, tighten it
Yeah.
up more if you can, right? Like, it's this
Yeah.
whole dance you do around trying to make sure that this other person stays calm and happy. It
Yeah.
reminds me of that Twilight Zone episode where there was the little kid that sent people into the cornfield. Do you remember this?
Yeah. How could I forget?
Right? It was, I remember watching that as a kid and being like, oh my God. So, for those of you that didn't obsessively watch The Twilight Zone as children, there was this episode where it opened around this like family dinner table, like, a big extended family, like, aunts and uncles and
Yeah.
cousins and kids and mom and the dad, right? A big extended family. And they're all eating and it seems totally normal. And then the little kid, he looked like he was maybe 10 or something, right? Got upset
Mm-hmm.
about something like, I don't like butter on my peas, or, something like that,
Yeah.
right? And everyone froze. The whole table just,
Yep.
like, you could hear silverware clank as it dropped. Everyone's eyes got big. You could see the whites of everyone else's eyes, right? And so as a viewer, you're like, what is happening? Like, why are they so worried at this little kid not wanting butter on their peas,
Yeah.
And then the kid turns to the mom and says, I've told you I don't like butter on my peas. I'm sending you to the cornfield. And then the mom
Look.
vanishes. And everyone else at the table just sort of sits there for a moment, frozen. And then somebody says, it's good that you sent her to the cornfield, Timmy. That's good. You should send her to the cornfield. Like, she should have known not to put butter on your peas. And the whole episode goes along like that. And essentially, this kid, has some power to like disappear people. They don't know
Oh
where they go, right? He says he's
my
sending them to the
God.
cornfield, but nobody knows where that is. And they don't come back. And I remember thinking, like, oh shit, this is how much I have to tiptoe around my mom, you know?
Absolutely.
Like at any moment, she could send me the cornfield,
Yeah.
like, right? That anger, that level of anger.
Can I point out something?
Yeah.
This is a classic description of narcissism, right? Because here is the deal. If you have the power to send a human being to the cornfields, you have a power to take the butter off the peas yourself. Seriously.
Yeah.
There should be zero problem. It's like, oh,
Right.
I handle this,
Right.
boom. But it's like, no, no, no. Like everybody else is supposed to cater to me, even though I
Hmm.
have the power.
Yeah.
I have the power, and then everybody else has the responsibility.
Hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's fucking
Yeah.
classic,
And,
right?
I mean, it's funny that in this show it was the little kid that had the power, but in families where there's a narcissist, that parent has, like you said, they have power over everything. They have power over your shelter, over your food, over your social connections,
Yeah.
over your self-esteem, right? So there's many, many ways they can send you to the cornfield.
And they are childish. I mean, I
Mhm.
remember realizing this was years ago that my kid was now more emotionally mature than my mom. I was like,
I
okay,
think my dog is more emotionally mature than my mom ever was.
absolutely. No, like I'm serious. Like when I see, you know, Penny is able to come to you and be like, "Hey, I want to play," or
Yeah,
whatever.
I
Like your
know.
mom was never like, be like, "How dare you not invite me to play with you? You don't
Yes.
hurt my feelings."
Yeah. Yeah. And so, another thing that I mentioned before, but that there's never any repair, right? So my mom would blow up at me, and then there was never any apology. It was just ignored. I mean, it was literally like
Never
it never
happened.
happened,
It never
right?
happened.
It
Yeah.
never happened. So she would blow up at me and say these terrible things to me, and then I was just supposed to somehow resolve it on my own by myself and
Yeah.
then pretend it never happened. And it could, we saw over and over again with our moms and their friends how one bout of anger could destroy an entire relationship. They then would never speak to that person again, right?
Well, and not just that, it would damage that person forever. I mean, it's like, because they'll say things that, is in that person's head forever now, you know?
Yeah. Or they'd send their flying monkeys after them if they were really mad, right? They'd do something
Absolutely.
to intentionally try to destroy their life.
Yep.
And I still wrestle with this to this day is there's part of me that worries that if I make someone mad, they will never speak to me again and or have some sort of vengeance against me and try to ruin me, right?
Yes.
And I
Yes.
walk around with that, I mean, as an adult, I understand that's not true. I understand that I have cultivated friendships and relationships in my life with people who will not do that. Intellectually, I understand that people with personality disorders are a very small amount of the population and that generally won't
Yeah.
happen. And even if it does, wow, fuck that person, right?
Yeah.
However, there's
Yeah.
still this part of me that's very, very young that even in my close relationships worries that one day there's something that will happen that will rupture the relationship so badly that that person will, you know,
Yep.
be gone, right?
Yep. Yep.
And that, it's been fine to this point, but like who knows, right? Like, there could be
Yeah.
that thing that makes them walk away, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it used to be that I thought all relationships were like that, right? That there was
Right.
they just hadn't reached the point where I'd done something horrible enough for the person to walk away.
Exactly.
But even now, as an adult, having done all this therapy and all of this work and all of that, that little kernel is still there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I just think like it's battling that is it's the same process as working on the people pleasing stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so people pleasers get a really bad rap, right?
Yeah.
I feel like they get a really bad rap. But I'm saying all this because you have to understand where that people pleasing comes from,
Yes.
right? It is an effort to contort yourself in such a way so that you don't ever piss Billy off and get sent to the cornfield, right? Or
Yes.
step on the landmine or,
Mm-hmm.
open up that floodgate that you were talking about, right?
Yeah.
It's an effort to stay safe, even
Yes.
after the relationship with the person who was actually a danger has ended,
Yeah.
because you
Yeah.
now believe that that could happen in any relationship,
Right.
given the right
Because
circumstances, right?
yes, because the lack of safety was so fundamental and so early on that you learn, oh, people are like this. This is what people are like. This is, this is how people I love behave
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
people who love me behave. You don't ever get that freedom. You don't ever get that safety. And you don't have enough cognitive development to understand that it's not 100% all the time. I was talking to my kid about, why the snake that is our pet bites us sometimes. And it's like, well, look how much bigger we are than them,
Hmm.
right? And it's like, it's better for them and their survival to assume that anything that big is a threat and
Hmm.
bite first, because if they make one wrong, if
Hmm.
they trust, it's over,
Hmm.
and that's really what it is. Yeah, it's about survival, and it's frustrating because I think it's like, you just want them to have more self-respect or whatever. It's okay to disagree. And it's like, that's not true from
Yeah.
where they came from.
Yeah, I was going to say that's not where they're coming from. And the fact, I mean,
Yeah.
that snake metaphor, you said one bite and it's over. Whereas for most people, if they angered their parent, it would be an unpleasant few minutes with an apology afterwards and a hug and maybe some ice cream, right? Like, you know what I mean?
I don't
But
even know what you're talking about. Zero concept of what you're talking about.
right, right. So, I think what people don't understand is it's the repercussions of the anger, right? The ignoring that it ever happened, the lack of the apology, the, keep going and going until you cry, right? that type of thing, I think until and when you experience it over and over and over and over as a kid, right? It
Yeah.
absolutely erodes your sense of safety in other human beings.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to say something which is pretty dark, but like, being verbally abused until you want to die,
Hmm.
is the same as feeling like that person could kill you. It may be that they're not taking food away, or it may be that they're not breaking your
Yeah.
bones, but if you have nothing inside of you by the time they're done and you would rather have it be over,
Hmm.
that's kind of the same.
Yeah.
It's not that much different.
I'm gonna take your darkness and I'm gonna up the ante. Are you ready?
Yes. Yes.
I mean, it's sort of the same thing, but I have a very specific memory of my mom doing exactly what you talked about, where she was just laying into me, laying into me, laying into me. And I was like trying not to cry. I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry. But she kept going and she kept going. And eventually, I literally lost it. I started crying and I fell down on the floor at the same time. Like I lost the ability to stand up, which I know might sound so bizarre to someone who hasn't experienced this kind of abuse, but I didn't have any energy left. Like I didn't have any physical
Yeah.
energy left and I didn't have any emotional energy left. I'd used everything I had and she'd kept going until I got to this point.
Yep.
And I remember falling down on the floor and I'm in the fetal position and I'm crying and I'm just, screaming like, stop, please, mom, stop, please stop, please stop. And of course that just fueled her. She didn't want to stop. And I remember this so clearly. I remember having the thought that I wish she were, this is the dark part. I wish she were physically hitting me instead of emotionally abusing me, because then at some point, either I would die or somebody would call an ambulance and I would be taken away from this.
Yeah.
And when we talk about like as adults intellectualizing how bad it was, or, like for me to have that experience of wanting to die as a child because my mom was being so emotionally
Yeah.
abusive,
Yeah.
that's intense.
It's
And that's,
insane. What child should ever have to have anywhere near of that experience
yeah,
from their own parent?
yeah.
What grown up can stand over a child and see them? I'm sorry, I'm like, what kind of person can see a child in the fetal position crying and begging them for,
Yeah.
you know, and we're the terrible daughters, right?
Hmm.
We're the ones, right?
Well, the reason I was getting yelled at is I'm sure because I was selfish or, arrogant or whatever, right? Like, so I deserved it in her mind.
Okay, yes. But I just want to point out, like, we are the terrible daughters, and we didn't do anything like that to them,
I know.
right?
Yeah.
The worst thing that we're doing is telling the truth now, right? And
Hmm.
trying to live our own lives. Not trying, living our own lives,
Yeah.
right? And it's
Yeah.
like, again, we have to provide receipts. It's the same thing with the people pleasing. It's like people look down on people pleasers, and it's just like, why don't you look down on the people who made them into people pleasers?
Yep.
Huh?
That whole thing
Right?
of instead of asking what's wrong with you, ask what happened to you, you know?
Yes, exactly. Exactly, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not like I'm angry.
Well, it's good.
You know,
This is the
it
anger
feels
episode.
really good. It feels really good to
Yeah.
to it's like a movie. I would love to like go back in time, and that shot in an action movie where it's like, the bad person is raising to strike someone, and then like the hero just grabs their wrist. You know what I mean? I'll be like, fuck you. And then like
I
you
think,
know,
honestly, I think that's one of the things that's really therapeutic about doing this podcast and
yes.
about having conversations with other people who had narcissistic parents is it is so much easier for me to be mad at your mom and be just infuriated,
Yeah.
at the stories you're telling. And with mine, when I tell the story about my mom, I tend to sort of like numb out and dissociate. So it's not that I'm not angry. My brain does its job very well of disconnecting me from like fully feeling what that was like, right? Which, I appreciate. Thanks, brain. I don't need to
Yes.
relive that every day.
Yes. Thank you, Megan's brain.
But the anger is still there, right? And
Yeah.
so when you tell a story, it's helpful. It's like a helpful channel for me to
Yeah.
feel anger at a narcissist that feels completely safe
Yeah.
because it's your mom, not my mom, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
So,
and I think that like when we have these experiences, it's like they imprint on us that it was okay. And I think part of it is like when there's no repair, when there's no acknowledgement that it even happened, it's like,
mhm.
oh, I guess that
I guess
was
that was
fine,
normal. I guess we just
right?
keep going about our daily lives, right?
Yeah.
When things happen and people don't follow up, you assume it's just normal. So if I
Yeah.
if I tripped and fell and then got up and kept walking, I would be like, oh, okay, that's normal. People trip and fall, right? So like when
Yeah.
there's not like if I tripped and fell and broke my ankle, well, then I would register that that was like a bigger deal. You know what I mean? Like there's this
Yeah.
way that if something's not acknowledged, or that if you just sort of keep going along with your daily life, that you, as a kid, internalize, well, that must just be normal, you know?
Yeah. There's a memory that's coming up. So Eric makes jokes about it, but like, so one time when I was grocery shopping with my mom, she would have me go and get the eggs, right?
Mhm.
And I would have to like go through each one and look and make sure that, that
I
none
had
of
to
them
do
are
the same
cracked and
thing.
everything.
What a
Oh
weird
yeah.
narcissist playbook there is. Go ahead.
Fucking shit. Yeah. And I would be responsible for them.
Yeah.
And of course, I can't remember exactly what happened, but one time there was like an egg or two that was cracked, and my mom lost her fucking mind. And I don't know if it was at me or someone else, but it was like she just lost it. And even to this day, like I feel very uncomfortable holding eggs. And so part of it is this is and it's just more stuff, right? It's like,
Hmm.
oh, well, maybe I shouldn't give my kid that responsibility. Of course, I think that was the only time ever that there was a crack, right? And then, of course, I'd have to hold them. I'd have to carry them. I'd
Hmm.
have them in the car because they could break on the way home. So
Hmm.
like they couldn't be in the bag with anybody else. And like I had to carry them in the house. Fuck, and
Hmm.
it's like, I like Eric will see me, like we'll go shopping and he'll see me like holding the eggs and be like, okay,
You're holding them in
sweetheart.
two hands, one
Yeah,
hand on each end
yes.
of the carton with a fully extended palm close
Actually,
to
it's
your
the other way
body,
around. You get close to the bodies. Yeah, like it's
watching where every foot is stepping so you don't trip. Yeah. Oh, I know that. I was
seriously.
responsible for the eggs too. Literally walking on eggshells.
Literally.
So next time we get together in person, I say that we have an egg destroying ceremony where we just drop eggs on the floor, or we
You
put
do
a
realize how
crack in them
expensive
and
that'll
then
be
put
right
them
now.
back in the container.
You do realize how costly that will be right now.
I know. Okay, well, we'll have to take a trip somewhere where eggs are cheaper, or I don't know. Yeah. But yeah, I think we need to have like an egg cracking ceremony, or we just destroy things, food things, right? We eat
Yeah.
something that's being saved for later. That was a big thing with my mom. If she was planning on making dinner and there was an ingredient and I ate it and she found out, oh my God,
Yes.
Jesus, I was in trouble for
Yep.
eating food as a child.
Yes, exactly. Well, dolls don't eat food unless I take a spoon that has nothing in it and then I put it in front of their mouth. I mean, that's narcissist love, right? I'm going to
Hmm.
pretend that there's food on here that's
Hmm.
actual nourishment. And
I'm
then I'm
gonna
going to like,
play the part of a nourishing mother, right? Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about you wanted to mention something about how something in the craft helped you. And then I wanted to talk about something that helped me understand anger. Like these moments in our life where we learned things or had experiences that taught us that anger was actually okay.
Yes. Okay. So some of this is sort of basic witchcraft stuff, but it's also particularly in my tradition. So anger is associated with the element of fire,
Hmm.
and fire is sacred, right? It's not
Hmm.
profane. It's that's not sinful, it's not bad. It's part of nature, right? And nature is divine. So again, nature is sacred, right? So like anger, fire can be channeled safely, right? Into warmth, right? Into cooking food, into light, right? We need all
Mhm.
those things, right?
Yeah.
And so like electricity is a great example, right?
Hmm.
Think about it, it's like lightning or something, incredibly powerful, but if it is contained and channeled well enough, I mean, look at all the stuff that we can do. I mean, it's fabulous. But like out of control fire, right, is like a forest fire, arson, or like a volcano eruption. But the other thing about that is that, and again, I'm not necessarily talking about anger, I'm talking about fire, but like a volcano eruption, the lava that comes out is creating new land. And yes, it unfortunately can destroy things, but it's also super nutrient rich rock. And over time, it is the best soil to grow things in. So
Yeah.
there's this process, and things like there's seeds in the forest that don't ever germinate until they get heated up, right? And so you need forest fires, that are, controlled or whatever, in order to keep the forest alive and
Hmm.
living and growing. So we have these beautiful songs and chants and stuff. And so, like, one of the things that I think about all the time, it really changed me, is a part of a song that says, "Our anger is a fire that brings change,"
Mm.
right? And when you are connected to nature, right, and everything is sacred, and when we think about as a group, our power can be shared and we can make good changes, then anger isn't scary,
Hmm.
right? Anger is like fuel and transformation so that we can actually make this world a better place. And it's not just a better place for me, right? Sacred anger would never let me protect myself by destroying my mother. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Because as much as I hate her, she's part of
We
nature.
all do.
You know what I mean? Thank you.
I
She's
don't think
part of
there's
nature.
anyone left alive that doesn't, by the way.
In my head canon, I'm still like, wow, I really wish I had enough stories to convince people that she was terrible.
Neither of our mothers were pleasant people. Anyway, go ahead.
That's true. They weren't. They weren't. So anyway, so and I think the other thing about that is that it's like the fire comes and then the rains come. You know what I mean? And then the
Hmm.
wind comes, and then the earth is restored, and all of these things. So it's this pattern. Anger comes and goes. It has use if we work with it well,
Yeah.
and that's really, and there's goddesses that wield, anger and fire in responsible ways, and that changed my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not a bug, it's a feature,
Hmm.
right? Anger is not a problem, it's not a sin, it is something that needs to be, it's like Frozen, right? Like the thing that drives me crazy about Frozen is that no one needed to be afraid of Elsa's power. All that they needed to do was to wait until winter, go into the mountains, and have her practice. It's winter, so no one could possibly get hurt by her learning about her powers. It would
Hmm.
have been a completely safe place. No one would have had to isolate from her, and she would have been fine. Anyway, that's me, a mental health professional and a witch, ruining Frozen. You're welcome. I will be back later to eviscerate some love songs because they're incredibly unhealthy.
Oh God, yeah, we should do a whole episode on love songs that are unhealthy. Every
Later,
breath
I'll
you
just be like,
take.
you just ruined that song for me.
Yeah. Well,
You're
let's
welcome.
ruin everything by exposing how it's part of a narcissist framework. Anyway, yeah, interestingly, my epiphany moment about anger is similar in that it was understanding how anger fits in sort of a larger cycle. So I was taking one of my energy healing classes. So this was probably 20 years ago. And we were learning about the Chinese five elements.
Hmm.
And we were learning about the associated emotions and all of that. And in Chinese five elements, actually, fire is joy, and earth is contentment. And then you've got, I
Oh my
think it's
gosh.
metal is sadness or loss, water is fear, and wood is anger. and they go in a cycle. And my
Wow.
teacher said, and here we are, a whole bunch of like, caretaking spiritual people taking these energy healing classes. And so he said, of all of those, what do you guys think is the most sacred emotion? And pretty much to a T, everyone was like, joy is
Right.
the most sacred emotion, joy. Maybe some people were like, contentment.
Sure.
And he was like, no, you were all wrong.
You're
He
all
said
wrong, people.
you're all wrong. He said the most sacred emotion is anger. He
Wow.
said because our jobs here as human beings having a spiritual experience is to grow and to learn. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in these time-bound bodies that are born, have a life, and then die, right? We're supposed to grow, we're supposed to learn.
Yes.
And he said anger is the emotion that drives you forward. He said,
Mm-hmm.
we get
Yes.
angry when something is in our way, when we know we are supposed to grow in a certain way or head in a certain direction. He's like, even think about road rage. Road rage is somebody pulling in front of you and going slower than you want to go. Your perception is that they're in your way, right?
Right. Yeah, 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 yeah.
So he said, anger is the thing where we get to a point where we're like, this isn't working for me. Something has to change. Either I have to change the world, or I have to change something in me, or I have to change directions or something.
Yes.
But it's this energy of forward movement, right? And he was talking about even conflict is inherent in nature. So he talked about if you
Yes.
plant a seed, if that plant just stays in its seed forever and never grows and becomes a plant, like it's not doing any, it's not, what's the
What's the
purpose of
point?
it, right? Like what's
Right,
the,
right. Yeah.
it's supposed to grow into a plant when you put it in the ground. But to do that, it has to push against the the outside of
Mm-hmm.
the seed, the covering. It has to
Yeah.
push through soil. It has to, right? There has to be this conflict. It has to have this,
Mm-hmm.
this force. And to me, but he said, the problem is that oftentimes people get stuck in one of these emotions. So people get stuck in fear, or they get stuck in loss, or they get stuck in anger, which is what was our mom's issue, right? They were stuck in anger. He said you
Yeah.
can even get stuck in joy. People who are constantly chasing joy and don't ever want to feel sad or afraid,
Yeah.
like the spiritual bypassing thing. He's like, that is also not healthy, right? Like there's
Yes.
no part of this cycle that you should be stuck in, right? Or that you should, cling to, right? That's sort of the basis of suffering is clinging to things, right? And not just
Yeah.
recognizing that change happens. And so when he said that, I really thought about that. And anger in the cycle, it's so he gave the example of like, let's say you get your dream job, you're full of joy, right? You're like,
Mm-hmm.
yay, I finally got my dream job. This is amazing. Like, now I can do it, and you're so happy for a while. So there's the joy, and then the joy goes to contentment because you get to show up every day and do your dream
Mm-hmm.
job and all of that. He's like, but eventually, your coworker who sits next to you who's chewing really loudly starts to annoy you, right? And
Yes.
you start to sort of have this like sadness, like, oh, this isn't the perfect job, right? And then it gets to the
Mm-hmm.
end of the quarter and you have to like do some math to like figure out your accounting. You're like, oh, I don't like this part of the job, right?
Yeah.
And so you start to realize that this thing that you were striving for and that you thought was going to be the thing to bring you all this joy, it does, but it's not perfect, right? So then you start feeling sadness around it. And then you start feeling fear, like, well, if this isn't the thing, what is going to make me happy? Or, then you start thinking like, well, what if this job turns into this crap thing that I don't like? And, I'm not happy at it anymore. And he said, that's where a lot of people get stuck is bouncing between that like sadness and that fear, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's
Sure.
like, but the thing that gets you out of that is anger. The thing that
Mm-hmm.
gets you out of that is, fuck this. I'm going to find an even better job. I'm not happy here, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that we
Right.
need that, right? And then we find the next job that's even better for us, or the next relationship, or the next whatever,
Yes.
right? And so that really helped me understand that anger is a really important part of being a person, of growing, of learning, of healing, of all of
Yeah.
that, right? It is a
Yeah.
necessary stage, and that getting stuck in anger is the problem, or
Yep.
getting
Yep.
stuck
Yep.
in any of those. but that if someone is stuck in anger, again, that's a them problem, not a me problem. Or
Yes.
if someone's stuck in anything, that means that they have work to do, right? That I
Yeah.
don't need to tiptoe around that or avoid anger or not be angry myself or anything like that, right? That
Right.
it's a
Yes.
vital part of this cycle.
Yes.
So that's sort of was the epiphany moment for me. I was
That's
like, oh, you
beautiful.
can't step around anger. You need it, you
Yeah.
know?
It's
It's
life
the most
force.
sacred emotion. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And that actually reminds me, because what I was going to talk about is there's this book, it's like another fantasy novel, and the protagonist goes to a new culture or whatever, and someone gives him a compliment and they say, "You have a fine anger in you." And what they
Mm,
mean is that it's like a combination of passion and life force and whatever, elan and charisma or whatever. And it's like, yeah, it's okay for you to call all of those things anger. It doesn't have to be destructive at all.
mm,
And actually, I did a lot of anger work in my 20s, and I had kind of arranged my life so that I didn't feel a lot of anger. But
hmm
that sounds weird because what I really had done was I got really good boundaries. I just didn't tolerate shit. You know what I mean? Like I could see it at a distance and I'd be like, all right, no, forget that. But it was really interesting because my kid was having anger management stuff happen. And with so many reasons. I mean, if you looked at the math of their life, it was like, yeah, you got plenty of reasons to be angry and
hmm
upset. But at some point they said to me, Mom, you never get angry. And I was like, oh,
mm,
okay. I got to do more work here because they feel ashamed because they feel angry a lot. And the only reason why I don't is simply because I've made all of these choices and set these boundaries that they don't know.
hmm
So it was like, okay, I do need to show them a little bit. I need to show them when I'm angry, but I know how to contain it, right? They don't have to do anything. Like I'll say something like, "Hey, sweetie, I just want you to know that like I got really pissed off today." And like, this happened and I felt this in my body and I thought this and then I did this and I feel so much better. You know what I
hmm
mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I gave him a path. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we are supposed to learn from our elders, our parents, or our village, or whoever, healthy
yes,
ways to experience all of the emotions, you know?
yes,
And unfortunately, most of us didn't get that. There's at least one emotion that our parents didn't have the skills to know how to work it. But yeah, modeling is super important, right?
super
And
important.
watching someone else go through this who is a little older and wiser is super important.
Yep, yep, yep.
Yep. All right. Crazy mom off time. We both told stories already today, but should we do more? Are there more crazy? There's an endless supply of
Oh
crazy
my God, endless.
stories.
I've got like a two-sentence story.
Okay, go.
So I don't know when, but at some point in my mom's life, she stopped wearing bras. It's very possible that it could have been before I was grown up. Now, I didn't know about this at all, but like it wasn't until like my 30s or whatever that my mom declared that the reason why she didn't wear bras was because bras cause cancer.
Okay.
Now, that is its own thing, but my mother bought bras for me. She bought underwire bras. She never like it wasn't until I was in my 30s or 40s that she gave me this information. She really believed it. I mean, I mean, I don't it was just like, perfectly fine with me getting cancer for
Yeah,
decades.
right.
He kept this from me.
Well, you're not the most important thing in her life, clearly.
Seriously. Well, if you get cancer, you get cancer. I mean, it's just like, it just,
Uh, yeah,
yeah, that's a little story.
that's a little story, but yeah, that's pretty funny. Yeah, I mean, she literally didn't. It's like, I mean, it really is the object thing, right? Like she was worried, but that worry didn't apply to you because you weren't a person.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and you know what, I mean, the scary thing is that it's less scary for a toy to get broken and thrown away than it is for that toy to reject you and say, I don't want to be your toy anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true. Well, because if you throw the toy away, it's on your own terms, right? You're
Yes.
still in control.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Whew, that's so lighthearted.
Yeah.
We are a laugh riot.
We are. It's a comedy podcast about narcissistic abuse. Have I told the wire hanger story about dry cleaning? Your story reminded me of
Oh,
that, but I don't
no,
remember
but
if I told that one on the
I don't,
podcast.
you may have, but I totally forgot about it. And now I'm thinking about Mommy Dearest too.
Well, no, it
Okay,
is
tell me.
like,
Oh,
so
okay.
there's a
Tell me.
postscript to the story that is Mommy Dearest. Okay, so
Okay.
you were talking about your mom and the, tissue paper that they would put on with dry cleaning. So most of my
Yes.
clothes weren't dry cleaned, but the really nice, she liked to dress me up like a doll, right? So I had these dresses that were extraordinarily expensive and nice, and that I had to like, be very careful when I was wearing. And those items,
Playbook.
right, those items would get dry cleaned, right? Like after I
Yes,
wore
of
them.
course.
One time she came into my room, I don't remember why, but she ended up going to my closet to look for something and saw that the clothes were still on the same hangers that they'd come back from the dry cleaners
Oh
on.
shit. I got this one too.
Right. So I had not taken them off of those hangers, taken them out of the plastic and put them on wood hangers.
Uh-huh.
And she,
Or padded hangers. Yeah.
right, or
Uh-huh.
padded hangers, exactly.
Yep.
And she like very violently pulled all of those things out of the closet and threw them on the floor and was just screaming at me that I had clearly intentionally ruined all these clothes that she'd bought me because now they had a mark where the wire hanger was in the shoulders that was not easy to get out because these were natural fabrics and blah 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 blah, blah blah blah, and that,
Oh,
how could I have done
man.
this to these nice clothes that she bought me or
Uh-huh.
whatever. And so, of course, in front of her, I had to, as penance, pick them all up and put them on
Jesus.
like wood hangers or padded hangers or whatever, and put the plastic back over them to make sure they were protected and all of this. She's, standing over me like, you do this and I'm sobbing and whatever, right? It was a horrible experience. So, yes.
I
Then,
fucking hate your mom.
yeah, it was
Oh my
terrible. She was
God.
punishing me for not knowing at age, I don't know, 7 or 8, that you shouldn't have nice clothes on wire hangers. Like, I don't even know if that is a thing, but that's what she was mad at me about, that I didn't know that. She thought that, of course,
And
I did know that, and I had intentionally ruined these clothes.
and if she had hand washed those fabrics and set them out to dry, there would be no hanger marks. I'm
Well,
just saying.
I think in her mind, it was the fact that she had spent all this money to dry clean my clothing, and I had intentionally then sabotaged that.
Right.
That was what she was mad about.
But it's like the peas in the butter, right?
Right. Yes, she could have easily. Yes. She was the one who picked up the dry cleaning. It wasn't me. I was 7. I didn't drive. So, like, she could have easily, when she put those items in my closet, or even when she handed them
Yes.
to me, say,
Right.
make sure you put these on different hangers.
Right. Or leave
Um,
them on your bed without the hangers on them so that you absolutely had to, you know what I
there
mean?
you
Like, or
go,
whatever.
right? Like, yes, there
Yeah.
were many options that would have been way more appropriate than pulling them out of my closet, throwing them on the floor, and then screaming at me while I hung them up properly as punishment.
I'm thinking about hanger related punishments for your mom.
Like one of Dante's circles of hell that involves hangers. Anyway,
Yes.
so then
Oh,
years later, when I saw Mommy Dearest for the first time, and there was
oh
that
boy.
scene that was literally almost word for word, like, you don't hang your clothes on wire hangers, la, 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 it ruins them, that was the scene from the movie, and that was what my mom had done to me, that I
Fuck.
completely had an out of body experience because I felt like this movie had been in my childhood home, had like had cameras in my childhood home, and I did not
Yes.
understand.
Yes.
I did not understand how this thing had been beat for beat recreated in this movie that had
Yes.
actually happened to me,
Fuck.
10 years prior or whatever. I was so freaked out by that scene. I was so unnerved and really did leave my body. Like I dissociated like
Yeah.
never before. I think I
Yes.
didn't I felt like I was floating above my body. Like I saw myself watching the scene. I was not in my body. And so yeah, so no more wire hangers.
No more wire hangers. I
Yeah.
love wire hangers.
I'm going to hang all my clothes on wire hangers. Actually,
I'm
I
gonna,
do hang most of my clothes on wood hangers now, and I understand why, but she could, you could patiently explain that to a child. You could
yeah,
correct it without yelling at them. You could just do it yourself if it's
yes,
important to you.
yes,
Take the butter off your own damn peas, or go get another serving of peas and just not put butter on in the first place.
yeah, yep.
Anyway, all right, tools. What's something you used to get through this week that was helpful?
I'm just still angry at your mom. I
Aren't
don't
we
know.
all? But
I'm
thank
like,
you.
I'm just like, I'm glowing. I'm glowing with anger. Let me just enjoy it for a minute.
It's so helpful. I even had a friend of mine who listens to the podcast who also has a terrible mother texted me and was like, I am so mad at your mom after that story you told last week. I don't remember which story it was. It feels so good. Like, I just want, like, listeners, if you just want to email us and tell us that you're mad at our moms,
Oh my
please
God.
do. Like, we
Now that
would be,
also is a really good t-shirt.
it
I'm
is,
mad at your mom.
yes, it would be so helpful for us to
Yes,
just have an
please.
army of people angry at our moms.
Totally. Oh my gosh. Okay. Tools. So what's your tool?
Me?
I need to transition my.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think. There's been a couple this week.
Okay, I have a tool, but it also is going to sound like a plug. So I feel weird about it, but
Oh,
can I
okay.
share it?
Well, whatever. Yeah.
Okay. So my tool has been I go into CapCut, I go into the template section, and I go through the memes, and then I make horrible, bitter, funny memes about narcissistic parents. And then I put and then I put them up on our Instagram feed. But it is just so nice to just feel like
It's a good way to channel your anger. You're doing something productive with it.
it's funny.
It
It's
is.
really funny. I love
Yeah.
it. It makes me so happy.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
get to be mean and I get to be mad and I get to be bitter and I get to make art. You know, when I was in elementary school, I wanted to be a video director.
Uh-huh. I
Um,
remember.
yeah. And after I stopped wanting to be a female mud wrestler, I got a lot of really weird looks when I said that I did not understand.
Makes sense to me. It sounds fun.
I know, like, and you get money and you get to slide around in mud with
Yeah.
like hot girls. Like, I mean, you
Yeah.
know, if only there was a doctorate in that. Rule 34. Anyway, so I get to make these little tiny videos and I just love them. I love them.
That's amazing.
So,
I love that. I thought of one that I did last night. So I spend a lot of energy and effort making my home, the place where I live, very comfortable and cozy and like feeling warm and good and safe because, didn't have a lot of safety growing up. So it's really, really important to me to have my sanctuary, right? My place that I could go. And last night I was in my bedroom, the setup I have in there. So I've got like very soft blankets and a comforter.
yeah.
And then I have this like little machine that projects like stars and an like a sort of an aurora borealis type of pattern on my ceiling that I put on instead of the overhead light because it's this nice, soft, beautiful lighting. And sometimes I just watch the patterns go. And then I have a thing set up where there's like a gooseneck arm that attaches my Kindle to my bed. And I have a little remote control clicker so that I can like go completely under the covers, like arms and everything under the covers, and just have the Kindle like hovering right in front of my face and
Oh,
read while all snugly under the covers.
oh
And
my
so
gosh.
I had this moment where, and then the dog was in the bed with me, being all snuggly and cute. And I just had this moment of like appreciating that I've been able to do that for myself, right? That I have
Yeah.
made this safe place for myself. And, they
Yeah.
always say, like, you have to be the parent to your kid, the inner child that, and I was like, oh, I've done that. Like, I've made this not
Yeah.
just safe, but pleasurable, right? Like this little sensory enclosure where I'm warm and cozy and have beautiful things to look at. And like one of my
Yes.
favorite activities, reading, I've made it as easy as possible for me. Like, you know what I mean? I've bought
Yeah.
myself extra tools to make the reading even more enjoyable. that I
Yay.
really have done this good job of creating a space that not only feels safe, but feels nourishing and good, and that
Hmm.
honors my particular sensory needs, my particular likes and dislikes, my hobbies, things like that,
Hmm.
right? And it just felt really good. I had this moment of being like, oh, this is nice.
Hmm. Wonderful. And you
And
are gifted at creating every single place I've visited you at that's yours. I am just, I just love the environments that you create for yourself. It's such a
oh,
gift that
thank
you
you.
have.
Thank
It's so
you.
true.
Yeah. So, coming from a place of being told I didn't deserve anything or
Hmm.
that everything that I asked for or needed was too much, right? Or that I was ungrateful or spoiled or whatever, to be
Hmm.
able to give myself even these small things, you know,
Yes.
feels like a win.
It's not small. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I think about when you're talking and you're describing is that not only is it safe like under the covers in your room, you know what I mean? It's also safe in your apartment,
Hmm.
on your block, in your neighborhood. And, because I just remember as a kid, like, yeah, you may have been technically safe under your covers, but that was where the safety ended. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah.
And so it's not just this one environment that you've created for yourself. You have created a life for yourself that is fully, right? Fully safe. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Yeah.
I think, one of the things that I think is really important when healing from this type of abuse is this process of learning to listen to your nervous system, right? Like learning to
Yes.
listen to what feels safe and unsafe. And
Yep.
then once you do that, letting your nervous system take the lead when it comes to your
Mm-hmm.
life.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yep.
if you're
Yep.
going to make a decision about something, what makes my nervous system feel better? If I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
decorate my apartment, what would make my nervous system feel good? You know, and that
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean always soothing things. It could be like I have these two super silly cutout pieces of art that are these like goofy animated dinosaurs that are,
Yeah.
like that makes me
Yeah.
smile, right? But like what makes me feel safe? What makes me feel joy? What makes me like letting your nervous system take the lead, I think is just a really, really important,
Yeah. Yep.
because it
Yep.
was
Yep.
so completely disregarded when we were kids, what we needed or what made us feel
Mm-hmm.
safe or good,
Yep.
that it's a form of, it really is self-care.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So
And we deserve it. We've been
we
through
deserve
the
it.
shit or the hell or something like that. Yep.
Penny is sleep barking. I want to hold the microphone up. Oh, I just woke her up. Damn. I was going to
Oh
give a little sign off to the podcast of a tiny
no.
dog going in her sleep, but she woke up.
That would be adorable.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for sticking through yet another light and fun and just frivolous episode of How to Be a Terrible Daughter.
It's all about the
We
surface.
It's all about the surface. Thank you for listening. We think you're amazing. We are so proud of
Yes.
you for doing this work that you're doing. It is the hardest thing. And we would love for you to contact us, either to tell us how much you hate our moms or for any other reason. We are on Instagram. You can always message us there. We're at Terrible Daughter Pod. We also have email, h2bterrible@gmail.com. That's the letter H, the number two, the letter B, terrible@gmail.com. And if you're wrestling with whether or not you should be a good person or not, and you're wrestling with this dance around the narcissist in your life and trying to keep them happy and trying to, or if you're a people pleaser and you've just like now, taken that to the rest of your life where you're just constantly worried about other people's reactions, we invite you to stop. We invite you to be the villain.
Yes.
We invite you to be angry. We invite you
Yes.
to state what you need unapologetically. We invite you to just embrace that you're going to be the bad guy in somebody's story, and that's okay. Thank you for listening. We'd be so grateful if you'd follow or subscribe and rate and review our new podcast on your favorite podcast app.
Make sure to share it with friends, family, or anyone that you think may benefit from this content.
And as a final reminder, you are not the crazy one.